Okay, hello. I just got this to work after just got it to work. Okay, so what I want to talk about today is mainly the world's history from the 1450s to the 1750s. I believe this is probably one of the more important times in history. It'll be 15% of the final AP test. So I want to do a review of it, especially the European rivalry between Spain versus Portugal, France versus Britain, Dutch versus everyone, since everyone just kind of stepped on the Dutch. Actually, everyone kind of stepped on Portugal, but Russia. Also want to talk about Russia out of isolation. That's also with like Ivan the Terrible, Peter the Great, and all the nice czars. Then I want to talk about the Islamic gunpowder empires with the Ottomans, the Safavids, and the Mughals. Africa, isolated Asia, technological advancements or innovations, and changes and continuities. Part of the script done. I didn't do all of it, sadly enough, but I did do part of it. But I'll probably be typing along as I go. So by the end of this live stream, I will have, if you want, I will probably share the document to people. So you can just leave it into the comments if you want it. I'll have to check the comments on my phone if it started. Yeah, so it started. So just gonna have to check it from there. Check the comments from there. Sorry, I have to. It's really hard for me to keep up with all the YouTube stuff since I'm not really good with technology, but I do know all this world's history. So first I want to start off with really is the European rivalry, especially with Spain and Portugal. Now, because I feel like this is the stuff that we kind of forgot because it was like right after winter break, and who paid attention after winter break? I personally didn't even. But Spain and Portugal, so a lot of it, Spain's going to be pretty important in world history it lasted for like a couple centuries until it got kind of not important anymore, but when it was alive, it was important. So Spain came to be in 1469 when King Ferdinand, I don't want to butcher these names, Ferdinand of the Christian kingdoms in northern Spain. So Spain was kind of divided, like the territory of Spain. Northern Spain was Christian, Catholic to be exact, and Muslim in the southern Spain. And Queen of Isabella of the Muslim, I can't even say Isabella, of the Muslim regions in southern Spain combined their territories under one house, creating a nation state. Spain would become so powerful due to its push in exploration, due to the fact that it tried with Christopher Columbus and it tried to establish new empires in the New World. And it had a very religious push of catechism, which would affect the whole Latin America. You see lots of Latin American societies, even to this day, be very Catholic. It also pushed its Spanish language, mainly a lot of Spanish. That's why a lot of sorry, you'll also hear my cat a lot, but that's why a lot of the Latin American countries to this day have a big Spanish language, and other cultures. It would spread to the New World, including food, dress, all that fun stuff. So Spain really affected Latin America, of course, obviously. Now, Ferdinand and Isabella, back to them, they built a formidable naval fleet, allowing it to rule the siege for the next century. So they built up their navy, being the Spanish Armada, and it basically grew in importance, and it especially grew in importance of Charles V, everyone's best friend Charles V, who inherited the Spanish Empire, but later would inherit the Holy Roman Empire in 1519. So he would inherit both empires, and he kind of had so much rule, and he brought all these riches due to war because he kept trying to fight France, and then he later fought the Ottomans. But this man, Charles V, would actually later abdicate the throne due to the fact that he was kind of pissed off that there were stuff coming around. So he got all stressed out due to having to rule such a large empire because he had the Holy Roman Empire and he had Spain. So he just kind of split it to his brother Ferdinand I to control the Holy Roman Empire and Austria, which Ferdinand did nothing, so you don't really have to know much about that Ferdinand. Well, you will have to know about Philip II, who was given control of Spain, plus all of its colonies. It had the jurisdiction over Burgundy, which was in France, Sicily, can't even say Sicily anymore, and the Netherlands. Now, Philip II, he was the one who expanded Spain the most, but it also kind of hurt Spain the most. He was the one who exiled all the Jews, all the Muslims from Spain, and really put the Spanish Inquisition into force. He really was the one who's really started pushing killing people because they didn't consult the Catholic. They didn't really follow Catholic catechism. So yeah, he would either expel them by exiling or murdering heretics. He also, because he was such this Catholic man, he pushed missionaries in the New World. With Philip being all Catholic and all, his increasingly Protestant territory of the Netherlands revolted against him. In 1581, provinces of the Netherlands gained their independence from Spain because they were like, we're Protestant, they're Catholic, they're trying to push this catechism on us, we're going to break away. And that's what makes the Dutch Netherlands, which of course will be another time, basically have a huge effect on the world, whether it's the Dutch Indies and they start conquering things because they wanted to be like Spain. Now the southern region, the Catholic region of more the Netherlands area, they remained loyal to Spain and would become Belgium in way future. Now Spain will show weaknesses when they poorly fight France and push catechism. Another sign of like their poor weakness is they try to attack Britain, the British Isles, sorry. But British defeats and devastates them like completely. Which, if you don't know where the British Isles are, I could pull this up. Spain and Britain fought over these isles for a long time, but Britain kind of ruins them. Of course, that's the British Isles. For some reason, I thought they were something else. Okay, so Spain always trying to go and conquer people. They try to conquer Britain, but Britain defeats them, and Britain gains power because they kind of have this now, we're so great we defeated Spain type of feel. Well, it completely devastates Spain, hurts a lot of their holdings, even though they had some holdings, but their glory days has passed because of Britain's defeat, and of course France's defeat. So when France and Britain defeat France, they get this rah-rah, they think they're so cool. Now, Spain did have a lot of gold, of course, from the New World, since they stole everything from Latin America, from silver to gold and all that. Spain wasn't a good country. Well, empire. Wasn't a nice empire, as per se. Its wealth went away fast due to wars and missionaries, because they tried to push catechism, of course, into the new colonies. And they had, of course, their huge armada, the Spanish Armada. Now, unlike Spain, Portugal focused on domination of coastal Africa. If you don't remember, Spain and Portugal, they had a peace, and I'm trying to remember. It was the peace of, let me find this, actually. I can't remember it exactly, but they had a peace treatment, Portugal and Spain. That Spain would get everything to the west, all the New World type stuff, and Portugal would get everything to the east. Now, Spain kind of won that part of the deal because Portugal, they thought that the New World was a lot smaller than what they thought, but Portugal does end up trying to take Brazil and everything, and that causes a bunch of conflicts, but that's all they had was Brazil, while Spain had everything for a lot of things, at least, not everything, because of course Canada was more France and Britain, and the United States had parts of the United States from San Antonio to, of course, Florida. But Portugal was kind of like won the bad part of the deal. They had like the Indian Ocean and coastal Africa and the Spice Islands because it was just kind of like this country. It was a small country. Remember, Portugal's that small country right next to Spain. So it's just kind of a floating empire. It controlled sea routes and was an early player in the slave trade, and had a lot of trading posts, but it could not extend large control and could not maintain many far in Britain to ultimately take them. Yeah, the Dutch seemed like they would be something that would be some people who would be peaceful, but they really were not. Now, I do not actually have it typed for England, but I do have it in my book all highlighted and everything. So England, at least where it starts out in the 1450s, because of course England kind of actually goes back to the Roman times, where it starts out at this time in the 1450s, you see King Henry the Eighth, who ruled from 1509 to 1547, because every time before then, to the 1450s, Britain was kind of useless. But he basically, remember, King Henry is the one who creates his own church because the Catholic Church wouldn't allow him to divorce his wife. So he creates his own church because that's, of course, what King Henry does. And so he nullified the Pope's authority in England, and he under the 1534 Act of Supremacy, he kind of puts himself as the head of the church. He thought he was so great because he had his own church. So he puts himself at the head of the church. I know this is kind of boring, but I really want to see what I can do. Yeah, this is only because he wanted to divorce his wife and marry somebody else, because that's life goals right there. Just establish your own religion with you as the head of it, just so you can divorce and marry somebody else. That's life goals. But he got another daughter, Elizabeth I, who oversaw this golden age in arts and known as the Elizabethan Age. So his famous daughter, Elizabeth I, starts the Elizabethan Age. How nice is that? This age boasted like commercial expansion and exploration into the New World. So this age is Elizabethan Age. It basically puts Britain into this power. It's this age of Britain finally coming to power and being the assholes that they always were in history. So when they decide to be the big dogs and take everything from Spain because they decide to be the assholes of the world. Well, that's basically most of Europe, but mainly England. You got to give it to England. No one can defeat England when it comes to being a dick in history. So along with that, English fleets destroyed the Spanish Armada in 1588. And during this time, the Muscovy Company was founded, the first joint stock company, and the British East India Company quickly followed the suit. So they started making stock companies, and they start to have the British East India Company, which will later take over India, because Britain is always land hungry. That's what you need to know about Britain. They're always land hungry. They basically follow Spain with their land hungry, and everything's money in Britain's eyes. Still not as much as today. That's more of the United States took that role. But anyways, the first English colonists settled in the Roanoke colony, which was in present-day Virginia. Remember, the Spanish did kind of come to America first as Europeans, because, of course, the indigenous people of Native Americans were by far here way before any of them. But English colonies, their first colony was the Roanoke colony, and that colony disappeared. I've always wondered where that went. Britain deserved that colony to disappear. But, and on top of that, oh God, we get Shakespeare writing his masterpieces. Yeah. I'm reading out of right now, kind of reading out of the AP World History exam book, expecting that to come over here. So the Elizabethan age, since I cannot pronounce anything, Elizabethan age was basically this age, if I need to summarize it, this age of England, thinking they're so great, destroying the Spaniards, then coming to America and thinking they would have success, but their first colony disappeared. Karma. And on top of that, Shakespeare of England decides to write. So that's the Elizabethan age for you, summed up. Along with that, there's the religious battles that were unleashed by the Protestant Reformation and were very unsettled in this region. So Christianity, of course, breaks off to a billion different types of Christianity. So in this thing, the Anglicans with the Church of England were battling the Catholics. In this battle, there's like millions of Christian battles. They get annoying. But this one in the Elizabethan age. So as all these great things happening, Britain's coming to power, Shakespeare's writing his shit, their colonies in America are randomly disappearing, we have these religious battles by the Church of England, who are battling, of course, the Spanish Catholics, because, yeah, everyone wants to battle the Catholics. So, and along with that, so we have these Church of England people battling the Catholics, who battled the Protestants and battled the Puritans. Wow. And so the Catholics and Puritan groups were regularly persecuted because, the Church of England, maybe the Church of England's probably going to be the most significant religion in the Church of England. I don't know if you get that from the name, or I don't know. I would probably guess that every other religion is going to get persecuted in England at this time besides the Church of England, but that's only my guess. When James I comes to power in 1607, after the death of Elizabeth and after her weird age of things, a reign that brought together the crowns of England and Scotland, he attempted to institute reforms to accommodate the Catholics and Puritans. So he wanted to basically save the Catholics and Puritans. He's wanted to save them, even though England, the Church of England, it's England's church, but gotta save these people. But widespread problem still persisted because the Puritans, who are now the Calvinists, and God, that's confusing, too many religions. The Puritans, who were Protestants, who were now, wait a minute, they were Calvinists, who were Protestants, who were like split okay. You probably should never get into religion with this type of stuff, but the Puritans did not want to recognize the power of the king over religious matters. Of course, every Christian's going to say that the power is going to be in religious figures, not in kings. But James reacted defensively, claiming divine right. You don't claim divine right when you're ruling a Christian kingdom. Just advice there, James. The Pilgrims, also during this time, lovely enough, randomly in here, the Puritans they were like, okay, you're going to claim divine right? We're going to move away from you. We're going to go to the Atlantic. And the Pilgrims crossed to Plymouth Colony. So Plymouth Colony, of course, connects to the Puritans and occurred during James' reign, which is after Elizabeth. Britain, you're confusing. So Jamestown Colony, as you might have guessed it, was also found during the reign of James. All these people were moving away from him because he tried to claim that he was divine. When you're running a Christian society, I don't think you're divine. No one's going to. No religion. You're whatever, dude. The English aren't known for their initiative place names. So then we get to all these other people of Britain. We get to Charles I, the son of James, who rose to power in 625. So James, after he was shamed for having divine power, he decides to have a son who rises to power in 625. 3 years later, desperate for money of the parliament, he decides, this is good to American history, doesn't this? Well, basically, to sum it up for the rest of this, basically, we have, because I think the rest of this goes into some American history, this basically sums it up. Charles I wants money from America because Britain can't make their own money for themselves because they have to rely on the resources that they stole from Native Americans. There you go. That summarizes England for you. Next, to go on to France. So, to go into an easier subject, France is going to be different. So, after the 100 Years' War from 1333, the English... the 100 Years' War drove English from France because England was this powerhouse after they defeated Spain. They still wanted to conquer people like they did with France. But after the 100 Years' War, the French finally kicked out the English from France. And the French began to unify and create a centralized authority and strong monarchy. But as elsewhere, religious differences stood in the way because Europe, the definition of Europe is religion gets in the way and causes other parts of the world to suffer. There you go. Now, France was largely Catholic, but during the Protestant Reformation, there's all these French Protestants known as the Huguenots who developed into a sizable and influential minority. Throughout the mid to late 16th century, the Catholics fought each other because, once again, what doesn't make European history the way that basically religious fighting and religion just going at each other, because nothing else makes Europe that. It's just Europe. The definition of European history is religion fighting religion that are two alike, that broke off from this religion. It's confusing. But anyway, so these Huguenots fought the Catholics in France. Lovely. How are you gonna, oh God. They bitterly fought each other and caused a lot of brutality. And until 1598, Henry VI of France, because no European ruler had to be basically have any, how do you describe it, any cool name. They have to always be the Henrys and the James. Well, anyways, the stupid Henry VI issued the Edict of Nantes, which created an environment of toleration. So here we got Henry VI different. So he said tolerate each other because you guys are too dumb to be fighting each other. So Henry VI was the first Bavarian king. What? The Bavarian king, Bourbons, I can't say this, this is French, ruled France until 1792, nearly 2 centuries. So he was the first of these people in France called the Bourbons, and the Bourbons ruled France until 1792, basically halting their unification. Then there's a lot of Catholic people playing roles. These aren't really important. These are mainly just Catholic people playing roles in France. for the rest of this, since a lot of the rest of it is about going really into detail about the American Revolution, along with Catholics fighting Huguenots. So we're going to skip the rest of that for right now. So then there's the last thing that's really described in the European powers, besides Russia, obviously. So, and that's going to be, obviously, our good friend, the German areas, the Holy Roman Empire, which wasn't holy nor Roman nor an empire, and it really wasn't even Germany because it was more Austrian. But as we kind of started this all, it all starts with the situation in German and Slavic areas of Central Europe during this kind of complicated time period. The Holy Roman Empire wasn't in Rome, and it was actually in present-day Austria, as I said, and surrounding areas of that. So it's it's mainly in like Austria-Hungary, Poland areas, Lithuania, a little bit in Czechoslovakia, all that fun stuff. So it basically It dominated the religion with geography because it was large. But it was also very feudal, and it was weak because though it was large, it was weak. Kind of like the ending of Rome, really. But that's maybe why it's called the Rome. No, it's not. But they thought they were as good as the Romans, and they thought they were holy, and they thought because they had this large area, they would call it an empire. But because it was weak, it really can't be Roman, nor was it even in Rome or even touched Roman territory, so it's not really Roman. And it really wasn't holy because it really didn't have any holy figures into it. But the Holy Roman Emperor was weak. The whole empire was weak too. And it kind of complicated the rise of the Habsburg family of Austria, which, as we already stated, but basically these Habsburgs, whoever, that's who Charles V was part of. Charles V was a Habsburg, whatever you want to call them, but he was the one who takes over Spain and the Holy Roman Empire. But they kept intermarrying so that they could take over things because that's what rich families do. And they always got to keep their money. Donald Trump. But anyway, so it's just complicated due to the fact that they were weak. There's not a lot you really have to know about them. They were Catholic, but they were Catholic along with Spain and France. But basically, they were like part of them were like the northern Germany was Lutheran, and then part of them were Protestant. But they were mainly Catholic. But all you really need to know about them, because they're kind of annoying and kind of like, what the hell are they? The Holy Roman Empire, this is all you really have to know. It has 3 bullet points for them because they're that pathetic of the empire. The Holy Roman, not even empire, the Holy Roman Empire lost parts to Hungary, to the Ottomans, Turks in the early 16th century, that's all you really got to know about them. You have to know that the 30 Years' War because we always have to put a number and years war in Europe too. The 30 Years' War in the Holy Roman Empire from 1618 to 1648 devastated the region, significantly weakening the role of the Holy Roman Emperors, even though they were weak, but it weakened them more. It was pretty pathetic, which in the 19th century would finally lead to the rise of hundreds of nation-states in this region. So what happens basically is the Holy Roman Empire was weak. They become weaker, and then they even become beyond weak in the 19th century, really. Yeah, in the 19th century, they just split into a bunch of different states. So you get Czechoslovakia, you get Austria, you get Hungary, you get Poland, Lithuania, all those fun things. They get split because this empire was so weak. Not even an empire, it was so weak, and nor is it important, but we have to learn it. By the 18th century, the northern German city-states, especially Prussia, were gaining momentum and power. So all these little German city-states, they were gaining power. So these Holy Roman Empire had no chance, never had a chance. Along with you might need to know about the Holy Roman Empire is that in 5, the Peace of Augsburg. So the Peace of Augsburg is in Holy Roman Empire. Just remember that. That's all you need to remember. And all it did, it was supposed to end the conflicts between the Catholics and Protestants that all like ruled the Holy Roman Empire, even though it was mainly Catholic, but there were Protestants and Puritans and all this shit. Too many stupid. Anyways, this Peace of Augsburg was intended to end all that conflict, but it didn't last really because it kind of sucked. And it starts to see Years' Wars begins in 1618 when Protestant territories in Bohemia, which was under the rule of the Catholic Habsburgs, shut up Habsburgs, they challenged the authority of the Roman Catholic Emperor. So all these all these Protestant territories were going after the Roman Catholic Emperor, and that starts the 30 Years' Wars, and it devastates the region of an already weak region. So that's all you need to know, that the Holy Roman Empire was always weak. It becomes weaker due to the 30 Years' War. Before the 30 Years' Wars was the Peace of Augsburg, which tried to unify everyone and be all happy and dappy and all that fun stuff, but it didn't, because it doesn't work, because treaties don't work like that. Peace universe by saying bop bibbity boppity bop, look, and universal peace, and I think people need to learn that too. So yeah, that's basically that. Nothing cares about, no one should ever care about that empire thing. Next thing I want to go to is the lovely Russia out of isolation. So Russia, all know Russia. So I have some things about it and some things not about it. So I will be reading a little bit more and having some nice, fun things about Russia. So Russia, it all starts off, it really starts off mainly with Kievan Russia, with the Mongols conquering it and all that fun stuff. But we're going to mainly talk about Russia in the 1450s, because the topic is the 1450s. So when the Ottoman Turks conquered Constantinople in 1453, the center of Orthodox Christianity moved northward to Moscow, which was called the Third Rome. Everyone should remember that, just due to the fact that, mainly due to the fact that Russia really just wanted a church there because it made them look powerful. But it was mainly due to the fact that the Ottoman Turks kind of conquered Constantinople, which was the center of Orthodox Christianity. Oh my. And around the same time, Russian leaders were overthrowing the Mongols. So they were trying to get out the Mongols. They had breaking out reforms and all that, these people so bad. And at that time, the Mongols were already declining. So it really wasn't hard to get rid of them at this time. They were kind of already done with. So these Russian leaders were overthrowing them and trying to get them out. And in 1450, this risky move by Ivan III of Russia, he refused to pay tribute to the nice, lovely Mongols, which I don't know how to, I don't even know. And he tried to declare Russia free of Mongol rule. Mongols really didn't like this, but they were weak, so they couldn't really do anything about it. So they just kind of let it be. But he did not actually see Russia being free of Mongol rule. He just stated that Russia was free, but he did not see it. It was actually his grandson, Ivan VI. God, you have to name your grandson 6, 7, 8, 9, 27. I don't. Now, Ivan VI established absolute rule in Russia, and by uniting it and expanding it eastward, he was the one who really actually established rule in Russia that wasn't Mongol. So his little granddaddy might have said, no more Mongol rule, or Mongols are out of Russia, but they really weren't. They just weren't picking on him because they were already weak. It was actually not until Ivan VI who kind of absolutely rules it and unites it and kind of expands it eastward. Now, Ivan VI, lovely Ivan VI, he recruited peasants and offered them freedom if they agreed to settle on new lands in the east. He was trying so hard to get the territories in the east and expand Russia to the Pacific. And his way of doing it was having these lovely peasants and saying, "Oh, we'll free eastward and settle." Now, the fun thing about this is that the peasants had to conquer the land. He gave them no weapons. He gave them nothing. He just said, you can be free if you settle east. And they were like, okay, but they had to use their own pitchforks to do it. So they conquered their land from some indigenous people, that sadly. So you always have to cry for that. But the recruited, so they wanted their freedom and they got their freedom, but they had to move eastward and conquer land for themselves. And they called themselves the Cossacks and expanded Russian territory. They are the reason why Russia expanded. No ruler did that for them. They expanded it. You got to give it to the peasants. They did it. They took Russia. Okay. Ivan VI was strong, but he had kind of made him have the ability to be evil, because he basically now could take all this power and he could manipulate it. So this makes him, historians and even people call him Ivan the Terrible, and he takes on the title of Tsar, Russian for Caesar, Julius Caesar, and expands Russia with the people. Yes, because in the 1560s, his reign was of terror because he executed anyone whom he perceived as a threat, including his own son in 1580. He basically Ivan, whatever. I can't say things. Whatever. It's Ivan the Fourth. Whatever. I can't say words. You think I'm cool? Catherine sent me something. But anyways, this Ivan, whoever he is, he's just call him Ivan the Terrible now. He takes on this title of Tsar and he expands Russia and all that fun stuff. But he also executes a bunch of people because he thinks he was like Stalin. You can actually connect him and synthesize him actually with Stalin because he didn't trust anybody. He didn't even trust his own son because he knew that his son maybe wanted his reign. So he started murdering people that could take the throne from him. Now, this leads to a bad thing because after his death in 1584, there was no strong heir to take the throne because he killed everyone who could take it. So everyone started battling over it. These feudal lords, they were all like, we wanted the lands, and he didn't leave it to anybody because this man started murdering everyone like I would because he would think he was immortal. Me too. So the situation grew messy from 1604 to 1613 and the period of the time of troubles. Madness subsided with Michael Romanov, I can't say words once again, which started the Romanov dynasty, which rules until 1917, which we all read or heard Miss Coward talk about. The lovely Romanov dynasty in the 1917 with the last Tsar getting his whole family shot and Princess Anastasia. I don't remember her name, but everyone talks about her. Disney, I don't know, Disney. Whatever. But anyway, this Romanov dynasty starts to grow and they take over and God damn it, I've like lost my place. They kind of consolidate power and ruled ruthlessly, making peasants serfs. So as you remember, serfs were really a European thing, with serfs and all that land that were tied to them, mainly in the Middle Ages, Middle Ages. Sometimes in the medieval ages too, but mainly in the Middle Ages of Europe, there were serfs and everything. Well, Russia does it in the 1600s. So they basically make these peasants serfs. They kind of like contradict, they kind of are like the opposite of Western Europe, who kind of make serfs peasants, but Russia makes peasant serfs, and serfs are actually a lot worse because they're slave-like. Peasants, so yeah, they're like kind of servants, like our-day servants, but like treated worse. But serfs are slave-like, for they're tied to land, and they have to they're tied to land, like anyone owns them, really. Serfs are they have a lot more worse of a life, as I would say. Though the dynasty helped Russia expand more with Cossack help, even though all these serfs and everything, and the Cossacks helped any of the peasants who were allowed to be free, because now the serfs were not allowed to be free. You know how the peasants, they were allowed to be free if they started expanding to the east. Now this is different because the serfs were not allowed. If they went east, they were probably going to be chased down or shot or killed or something, but they basically were not allowed freedom for going east. But the rest of whoever was peasants or anything, or the rest of basically the generations of Cossacks, they helped expand Russia more. Now I also want to go because I still have stuff on Russia right actually now. Starting with Peter the Great, who ruled from 1682 to 1725. He came to power. At the same time he came to power, he was Westernized Russia because Russia was in this isolation. They were expanding east. They were getting more Asian. They were more Asian-like because a lot more of their territories were in Asian communities. Now he wanted to make it like Europe. He built Russia's first navy because everyone wants to copy lovely Spain's navy. He founded St. Petersburg on the Baltic Sea. When you're so self-centered that you name the capital after yourself, St. Petersburg. What? So basically, St. Petersburg becomes a home to many Western European engineers, and he makes St. Petersburg beautiful and westernized because that's what Russia wanted. They just wanted to be like Europe. So he makes it all European with scientists and architects and artists who were recruited specifically to westernize Russia. Women of nobility and men of nobility were even forced to wear Western fashions. People were forced to wear and shave their beards and make themselves look European, because that's what's cool to this day, and that's what Eurocentric beauty is all about. But most of the hard labor of building the great new city was accomplished, of course, by serfs turned slaves. Nice. So these serfs had to work on it, as these cool people gotta be westernized. How nice. Now, another great ruler, even though we're only supposed to touch on the 1750s, apparently we also have Catherine the Great. And why not name yourself Catherine the Great after Peter the Great? Because you have no creativity. So under Catherine the Great, who ruled from 1762 to 1796, even though this is supposed to be from 1750 to 1750, now she enlightened the policies of education and Western culture were implemented. Even still, after everything she even tried to do and everything like Peter tried to do, they wanted to make Russia like Europe. They tried so hard, even though it's mainly in Asia, that it still made Russia suffer, because Catherine fiercely enforced repressive serfdom and limited growth of a merchant class. So even though they tried to push such a Western thing, they wanted to keep such a Russian like tradition to them. Not tradition really, but they wanted to become like very European, but they couldn't let go of some things that are more Russian-like. They couldn't let go of the serfs that they like wanted so badly, even though if they wanted to be like Europe, they didn't need serfs. But basically, Catherine was the one who gave most of Russia a European, more of a European conquest. She gave more European land. She conquested the European lands of like Poland, modern-day Poland, Liquesta, territories on the Black Sea. She like basically advanced Mediterranean and to its south and west. So she grew Russia more, but she grew it towards Europe. Peter the Great tried to expand even more towards Asia, and he tried to westernize things, and everyone before him tried to expand it towards the east and specifically for Europe, especially to get her passageway to the Mediterranean. So Russia, it's all isolated, but it starts to become not isolated during this time in the 1450s to 1750s with Peter the Great and I was going to say St. Catherine, but Catherine the Great, because, you know, Peter the Great and Catherine the Great, if you have to name yourself the Great, that's probably not so creative. Why not Catherine the Astounding or Catherine the Catherine the Calvier? I don't know. So next is one of my favorite things to cover is the Islamic gunpowder empires. Especially, I love the Ottomans and the Safavids and the Mughals. I don't know as much about the Safavids, but of course everyone now knows. But we're going to really go over the Islamic gunpowders of the Ottomans. The Ottomans are going to be the most important out of the three because they last by far the longest. Now, I have all these lovely note cards on the Ottomans, so I really don't need to really look into this book, but I probably will anyways. The Ottomans, the history of the Ottoman Empire actually extends before 1450, which everyone knows how Ottomans kind of like what the beginning of them were known for. They, of course, captured and sacked Constantinople in 1453, which, of course, to anyone who knows They Might Be Giant song, Istanbul, you would know that Constantinople Istanbul was Constantinople, but now it's Istanbul. So you might recall from the previous chapter that the territories of the former Islamic Empire were overrun by the Mongols in the 13th century. Recall that the Byzantine Empire, which centered in Constantinople, which of course was the Eastern Roman Empire, controlled most of Turkey at this time. And it also influenced southeastern Europe and Russia. So as the Mongols fell and as the Byzantines got weak, the Muslim Ottomans in this region challenged the Byzantines, because that's what you have to do with your life. As it grew into the 14th century, they called themselves the Ottoman, came to dominate the modern-day Turkey, and eventually in 1453 invaded Constantinople and followed the Byzantine Empire, which was the longest-lasting empire of all time. Sorry, guys. Eastern Roman Empire. The Romans were always the coolest people. Now, the Ottomans made Constantinople their capital city and renamed it Istanbul, like I was just saying. They converted the great cathedrals, such as the Hagia Sophia, into mosque. Now, if you remember the great cathedrals, they were beautiful cathedrals in the city of Constantinople. But if you remember, the sacking of the Byzantine Empire, Constantinople, actually eventually even leads, kind of like dominoes, it all kind of leads to the Protestant Reformation because of these beautiful cathedrals basically being destroyed in Constantinople. That's, of course, when the Pope at that time tries to make these beautiful, the Sistine Chapel and all that type of fun stuff. He tries to make these beautiful cathedrals. And that later starts, of course, the Protestant Reformation. So that's really a connection between it, because what starts the Protestant Reformation all goes back to how the Ottomans captured Constantinople in 1453. In the expanding empire, Christians and Jews were still allowed to practice their religions because, contrary to what people say today, the Muslims are actually pretty tolerant, believe it or not, people. And they made their empire more tolerant than both the previous Islamic empire and the other major regimes of this era. They allowed people to have their own religions. They allowed it. It wasn't like Spain, who kicked everyone out, but that's none of my business. They basically expanded their empires to a lot of parts. They saved Italy by the ancient Roman Empire, but except for, they basically started conquering everyone besides Italy, because you always got to save Rome. In other words, the Ottoman Empire extended from Greece eastward to Persia and all the way around the Mediterranean into Egypt and northern Africa, not touching Italy. Remember that, not touching Italy. So the empire grew, and so did religious persecution. So to conquer large territories, the Ottomans would enslave Christian subjects and turn them into the fighting warriors known as the Janissaries. Coming back to them. So these fighting warriors, the Janissaries, made up most of the Ottoman army. And much of this expansion occurred during the reign of Selim I, who came to power in 1512. Significantly, Selim claimed that he was the rightful heir to Islamic tradition under the Arab caliphs. With that claim, and with such a huge empire, Istanbul became the center of Islamic civilization. Yeah, thank you, Selim. Thank you, Selim. Just 8 years later, Suleiman I, aka Suleiman the Magnificent, rose to power, and he built up the Ottoman military, but also actively encouraged the development of art. So under Suleiman, I can't say these words, and I don't want to butcher them, but I'll spell these out lovely for you right here. I can't even spell. Suleiman the Magnificent rose to power, and he basically built up arts, and he built up the Ottoman Empire's military. And basically, it was a golden age for the Ottoman Empire, which lasted from around 1520 to 1566. During this time, the Ottoman Empire was kind of weakening, though. It was pushing into Europe and through Hungary, but wait, not the Ottoman Empire. I'm sorry, the Holy Roman Empire was weakening. And of course, when the Ottomans were pushing in to these other parts of Europe, they were easily able to take over this weak empire called the Holy Roman Empire. It's not even an empire. It was weak and it was dumb. And the Ottomans said, shut the fuck up, we're taking over. So the Ottoman Empire lasted until 1922. And it basically was... It was a large empire, it was Muslim, and it was like the sad man of Europe, because European powers liked it, unless they they liked it until like the 1800s. It was just probably the 1800s when they started getting a little iffy of the Ottomans, because the Ottomans at that time were already declining. Russia had like besties with the Ottoman, and Britain liked the Ottomans. Everyone, like the Europeans liked the Ottomans. It's just the fact that like Europe started to wake up and be like, wait, they have control of like our oldest civilization of Greece, which of course they decided to take it away from the Ottomans. Why the only time that European powers got together and saved each other, and worked together, when the Ottomans was the war with Europe versus the Ottomans over Greece, and that's the only time Europe will ever work together, really. But yeah, so that's basically what happens with the Ottomans. They last until 1922, until everyone sees them as a burden. So the Ottomans were this great, beautiful empire that originally allowed religious tolerance, but as time went on, Selim, who came to power in 1512, he made Constantinople Istanbul, and he made Christian kids janissaries. So that's what Selim I did. And then Suleiman the Magnificent, he built up the Ottoman military and encouraged development of arts, spreading arts and enlightenment all over the Ottoman Empire, making them even more European. And it experienced really a golden age during his reign from 1520 to 1566. And he basically pushed the Ottoman Empire, expanding it into the Holy Roman Empire. And so they were just this big empire. And then after their golden age, they started declining. And then they started being the sad people of Europe because they weren't as industrialized as the rest of Europe. So they lasted until 1922, until Europe sees them as a complete burden and gets rid of them. Along with that, after we have the Ottomans, you don't have to know much about the Safavids because not even the book remembers Safavids that much. So the Safavids were just the Ottomans' eastern neighbors, and they were just a centralized state based on military conquest and dominated by Shia Islam. Remember, Shia Islam is completely different from the other type of Islam that I can't even remember right now, but the Safavids is the only place on earth that do Shia Islam. Its location between the Ottomans and the Mughals in what modern-day Iran, making Iran the only place doing Shia Islam to this day, resulted in often contentious relationships between Muslim states. I can't even say alliances anymore. Alliances with Europe against Ottomans, and a continuation of long-standing rift between the Sunni and it's Sunni. So Sunni Islam is mainly what you'll see today is Sunni Islam, but there's of course Shia Islam because the Muslims only need two types of Islam. They don't need 50 million types of Christianity that get annoying, and then they all have wars with each other, and then they conquest things and call themselves Christian. Okay. So, yeah, that's all you have to know about the Safavids. They were the other type of Islam, which is the Shia Islam. They just were kind of between the Ottomans and the Mughals, and they weren't really important. They were just military conquestors, and they kind of failed at everything after a little bit. So, and they kind of made Iran. So, the Safavids are Iran. Just remember that. Now, the Mughals, of course, relate to the Mongols. After false starts in 1526, Babur, a leader who claimed to be a descendant from Genghis Khan, but was very much Muslim, invaded northern India and swiftly defeated the Delhi Sultanate, also Muslim. So before all this fun stuff, before the Mughal Empire, there was the Delhi Sultanate, but Babur, this leader who claimed to be a descendant from Genghis Khan, which, if you know Genghis Khan's DNA, he probably being a descendant of Genghis Khan. But he was Muslim, and he invaded North India and kind of ended this Delhi Sultanate. Now, he quickly established a new empire known as the Mughal Empire, which is based off of the name Mongol. It dominated the Indian subcontinent for 300 years until Britain decided to be that asshole again who conquers everyone. Now, the Mughal Empire is distinct for several reasons. First, within about 150 years, it united the entire subcontinent. So the Mughal Empire basically unified all lovely India because sometimes other countries are before us before the Europe with unification. Recall that northern India experienced a series of invasions of many empires, and many of which you reviewed in the previous chapters. Okay, well, nice. The same way it's not true about southern India. They were kind of split because there were so many more cultures in northern India than in southern India. But the Deccan Plateau in southern India was mainly isolated, and it was there that Hinduism became firmly established. Now, northern India is going to be a huge playoff because northern India had a lot more territories, and it had more cultures, more cultures into it, and more people who conquested India. Now, that's going to inspire more Muslim feeling with them because, of course, there were more Muslim conquests in northern India versus in southern India, they were just Hindus there, and they were kind of isolated from everyone. Now, Babur, who was the one who kind of destroyed the Delhi Sultanate and made the Mughal Empire, his grandson Akbar, who ruled from 1556 to 1605, was able to unify much of India by governing under a policy of religious toleration. So Akbar was religious tolerant. He was the good one. Remember this. Akbar is the good one, and he allowed Hinduism and Islam to be practiced openly. And he eliminated the jizya, which was a head tax on Hindus that had been a source of great anger to the people. and try to improve the position of women by eliminating the sati. Of course, that's the practice in which high caste Hindu women would throw themselves onto the funeral pyres. Like, whoever thought of that? Whoever thought of, like, you know what, my God, what type of men are, oh God. Anyways, he even married a Hindu woman and welcomed Hindus into government positions. So Akbar is this nice, peaceful dude. He had tried to improve gender roles. He tried to elevate positions for religious figures. I mean religion, like elevate positions for certain like religions and everything. So he tried to be very nice, at least. And he wanted them to be peaceful because, yeah, that's the way to be peaceful and everything. And that actually is a way to be peaceful. Unlike all the people in the Holy Roman Empire who just, like, waved around their wands and just was like beepity-bop religious tolerance. No, like, he actually put reforms he was the one who actually put Hindus into position and actually tried to help. He made reforms. He didn't just say bippity-bop, oh, look, religious freedom, religious tolerance. No, he actually did something. That's what differs from like him versus like what the Holy Roman Empire did. And that's why the Holy Roman Empire is shit. But personal opinions. But then after that, that was like a golden age. Under Akbar was like this beautiful golden age of art and architecture and thoughts, and he had like all this religious tolerance, and it was nice. India was nice and peaceful under that time. But then Akbar's grandson came along, Shah Jahan, who created the Taj Mahal. But however, after Akbar, two developments forever changed in India. So after this nice peaceful man of Akbar, who did so much for India, which actually made it peaceful for so much time, Shah Jahan came. And the first that he did was he kind of ended religious toleration with the new emperor after him, Aurangzeb, who was a very pious Muslim. He came to throne after nice Taj Mahal Shah Jahan. Shah Jahan, he built the Taj Mahal and he did art. That's basically all he did. But then Aurangzeb, the known negative connotation one, he was the one who came to throne. He was very pious Muslim, and he enacted pro-Muslim policies and waged wars on the expansion to control or conquer the remaining portions of India, still not under Mughal control. So Mughals had most of India, but there was like little spots of it that were little bits of like small Hinduism. So he just like the Muslim government reinstated the jizya, which basically was this tax on Hindus, and then he started to persecute Hindus who were organizing against their Muslim rulers and neighbors. Sorry. So Aurangzeb, he decided after all these nice things Akbar did to completely ruin them. He reinstalled this like tax on Hindus. He basically reinstalled all this like religious toleration, like the fact that the ending of religious toleration, for he just started to conquest these people who didn't really like him, and didn't like that he was trying to hurt Hindus and their society even more. The second development after with the Aurangzeb, so he destroyed a lot of the religious tolerations. He started more Hindu persecution and messed up India for that part. The second development was the arrival of Europeans. So he makes the mistake of allowing Europeans into India. If only they knew about Britain. If only they knew about Britain conquering France and then destroying. If only they knew about Britain. Or they wouldn't have done this. They were. Well, in the early 17th century, the Portuguese and the British were fighting each other for the Indian Ocean trade routes. Because remember, the Portuguese kind of got the bad side of the coin. They flipped the coin, and Spain got everything in the New World, and Portuguese got everything in the Old World, from the Indian Ocean trade to parts of Africa worthless, because Portugal is a small place in the Portugal still had some posts in the Indian Ocean, though, and Britain was trying to fight over. They wanted to get it, because Britain, once again, Britain, oh God. So Portugal had established a trade with the city of Goa, where it also sent Christian missionaries, where Portugal wasn't trying to conquer everyone at this moment. They were just trying to trade. But Britain, they weren't trying to do that. But they gained control of trade in Bombay. By 1691, Britain dominated trade in the region because they just basically kicked out Portugal. Because once again, if you don't mess with Britain, at least in this century, because they're pretty evil. And they also founded a city of Calcutta and another trading post. And the Mughal empires were annoyed with Europeans. They had to basically know that the Mughal emperors were like annoyed with Britain coming in and just establishing trading posts because Britain was dominant. But they really couldn't do anything because Britain was dominated like a lot more, dominating with power, like with weapons. And also they saw them not as really, they saw them as harmless. But of course, everyone would know that Britain was actually an imperial superpower. But before 1750, Britain didn't do anything, actually, to India. They just wanted some port cities before they took over India for themselves. But it was a huge forces united under strong Muslim rulers until Aurangzeb kind of like ruins everything. No one in the Mughal Empire actually thought that this empire of India could be conquered. Well, and like they basically couldn't imagine that a century later, a British woman named Victoria would be crowned the Empress of India. Like they never thought, like none of these Mughals, they were so high up and they thought, oh, these harmless British, they're just sipping their tea when this, no, if only they knew about all how they took France and how they the American Revolution and how they murdered indigenous people like nothing. And if only they knew, because they all just thought the British were just sipping their tea and trading, but no, Britain. But actually, that's a completely different thing because they actually didn't try to kill people until the black hole of Calcutta is when Britain starts to conquer India. So, lovely enough. That's basically all you need to know, really, about the Ottomans, the Safavids, and the Mughals. So the Ottomans were these Muslim powers, of course. They were just this powerhouse. They were just empire that was run by, that had this strong military. And they had the Janissaries, and they were first really like religiously happy and everything, and then they had Janissaries and just like kind of started recruiting Christian people and like that were like whatever. Anyways, they just lasted till 1922. They were known for taking down Constantinople and establishing more of a Muslim Islamic faith there versus a Orthodox Christianity, which sets off the Protestant Reformation and sets off Russia really coming into Greek Orthodoxy and everything. Well, Russia was Greek Orthodox, but it kind of gives Russia more power because they become the third Rome and become like a new power of religion. All you have to know about Safavids is that they practice another religion from the other two, which is Shia Islam. But like that's all you need to know because they're not important either. They're as important as the Holy Roman Empire. Actually, no, you probably have to know a little more about the Holy Roman Empire, but they're still not important. Now, the Mughals, you just have to know really about Aurangzeb and Akbar and how Akbar was this great person who promoted religious tolerance, and Aurangzeb wasn't. He just like tried to destroy Hindu temples. He like tried to like hurt Hindus and everything and persecute them. And he also, he was like, he wanted to end the religious toleration. And also Aurangzeb, he also like because he thought he was so great being his on so top in India. He also thought the Europeans, like especially the British, were just so friendly and not going to do anything. But this all turns out to be a mistake. For the Mughal Empire eventually will fall and Britain will take over. So that's all you really have to know. Africa, there's not that much you have to know. Remember, Africa doesn't have that much European contact from 1450s to 1750s, but Portugal does kind of go through there, but they're kind of weak as fuck, so no one really cares about them. What you do have to know was the transatlantic slave trade starts happening during this time, and a lot of the richer people, like the elites in Russia, they start to get wealth from this trade. To establish powerful kingdoms due to this trade, like Shanghai, and into the kingdoms of Congo and Angola. and among others. While you're not expected to know each of these kingdoms in details, you should recognize the pattern of state building and the relationship of Africa to both the Islamic world and the Europeans. Now, the Songhai was a sub-Saharan empire, and it was mentioned briefly because, once again, Africa doesn't have that much in this time. And its predecessors were Ghana and Mali, and it was an Islamic state with economic ties to Muslim world through the trans-Saharan trade of salt and gold. So Songhai was known for salt and gold, and basically mentioned a little bit, and it had like conquest and military force. What you do have to know is you have to know Sunai Ali, who consulted this empire in the valley of the Niger River, using imperial navy, established central administration, and financed the city of Timbuktu. Oh, lovely, everyone should know that one, as a major Islamic center. And like all great empires, Songhai fell, in this case, to Moroccans with muskets. But you don't have to know much about Moroccans, so you really don't have to know much about India during this time. There's just some fun things about Songhai, and there's also Congo. On the west side of Africa, the centralized kingdom of Congo was bolstered by its trade with the Portuguese merchants. Since it was so weak, it just had to, it knew it couldn't conquest anything. It just had to trade. So Portuguese was trading with Africa as early as in the 1480s and established close economic and political relationships with the king, which initially worked to everyone's advantage. For the Congo converted to Catholicism, and King Alfonso I, who was the king, we should probably know King Alfonso. He was the king of Congo who converted his people to Catholicism because of the Portuguese, who were once again just trading because they couldn't do anything else with their lives. And then there was South of Congo, which was Portuguese trading port in Ndong or Angola. So mainly these were just trading ports for Portuguese. You just might have to know some of Congo, with King Alfonso being Catholic and everything and converting his people. And also you have to know about the trans-slave trade, because that's what brings a lot of elites to power and also attracts more Europeans to Africa besides resources, but also the slave trade also attracts more European powers to Africa. Next, I'm going to have to go over isolated Asia fast. So isolated Asia, basically you get Zheng He, the Chinese navigator who tried to lead fleets through Southeast Asia into the Indian Ocean. So what Zheng He does is basically after the Mongol dynasty in China, you get the Ming dynasty. If you know your emperors, Yan Ming. Ming is after the Yuan, which Yuan is the Mongols. So the Ming tried to build a strong centralized government based on Confucianism principles and reinstated civil service exterminations and removed Mongol influence because they were so ashamed of their Mongol influence, they got rid of it. So then we have Zheng He, that's when he comes to play, and he just tries to persuade the Ming to go and explore the Indian Ocean. The Ming do, and they find that the Indian Ocean, they think they're better than everyone. So they were like, well, it's worthless to trade here. Everyone else is under China. So they just laugh and they kind of go back. So they really don't like to visit the Indian Ocean again because they kind of thought they were so great. Now, what happens to the Ming dynasty was it starts in decline eventually, and internal problems persisted in the Ming dynasty, and with famines crippling the Chinese economy and peasants revolting against the powerless Ming rulers. That in the Ming, in 1644, the Ming emperor invited a group of Qing warriors. It's spelled Qing, but I know it's pronounced Qing. Warriors from nearby Manchuria to help them with this peasant uprising, but that doesn't work because these warriors actually ousted the emperor. So the emperor wanted these warriors to come in to help them with the peasants, but they actually kind of oust the emperor. And that's what happens. It's the Qing or the Manchu dynasty begins, and the Manchus rule China until 1911, which basically until the communists, or the Republic really of China. The king were from Manchuria and were not ethnic. I can't say words, but they were not really Chinese. But they wanted to remain an ethnic elite, forbidding Chinese to learn the Manchu language or to even marry Manchus because they thought they were so much better than Chinese, even though the only reason they came to power is because the emperor invited them in and they were able to take it over. If you're in the enemy's base, you can obviously take it over. But the Qing expanded a lot of China. Not even a lot, but they extended their empire into Mongolia, Central Asia, and Tibet, and they added Vietnam, Burma, and Nepal to vassal states of China. But the Chinese did not aspire to conquer the rest of the world. They weren't Europe, especially Britain. They weren't Britain, but they stayed focused on China and its surrounding neighbors because they wanted money, tribute money. They didn't really want all the luxuries that like Europe wanted. They didn't want to really murder people the way Europe did. But the Qing were the ones who were woke. They were the first people to be woke because they felt threatened by European advances, for Europe kept trying to get into them and like have rights, and they wanted to trade more with them. And so they started to like expel them. In 1724, for example, Christianity was banned, and in 1757, trade was restricted to just Canton. With Canton, still trade with Europeans was substantial, and the Europeans bought large quantities of things that China have, and they had large, of course, this kind of, and the Europeans got back silver. So the Qing were the first people to ever be woke because they noticed that the Europeans were powerful and that the fact that Europe's going to try to invade them. But then we have Japan, which if you want to know about Japan, I don't know, I'm not going to really talk about it, but if you really want to know about Japan in the 1450s to 1750s, I just recommend you to the History of Japan video. It's 9 minutes, but it tells you everything you need to know about Japan. But really in the 1600s, what happens, if you want a really brief summary, is in that year the Tokugawa Ieyasu established the Tokugawa shogunate, which was a strict and rigid government that ruled Japan until 1868. So basically, all that happens during this time is the Tokugawa shogunate, which it consolidated power away from the emperor and at the expense of the daimyo, which were the feudal lords. And basically, it basically took away power from the emperors into the hands of shoguns, who were like military states and were very divided. And it was also known as Edo period because the capital moved towards Edo, which is modern day Tokyo, because before this, Japan always kept moving their capitals. But you would know that if you watched the History of Japan video. So to conclude about isolated Asia, Asia was isolated really because China was only trying to expand with its neighbors and city states. They didn't really want to expand like completely the way Europe did, even though they had a lot of the power that they could have. But they just wanted to expand to people near them. And another thing that affected it is also because Asia, 1 second, wait, I felt like, 1 second. But one thing about it was that like Asia was so isolated from like Europe and everything, was that because like European traders were banned. They were only like put into one city in Canton, which of course will later cause a refute and everything. And Japan was isolated because it was more of it was on the island, didn't have as much power. The Tokugawa was so centralized and so like it was so to itself. So it was strict and rigid government that ruled Japan, and it consolidated power away from the emperor, which kind of hurt Japan for a while. But they were able to have some European like influences, of course, the Dutch and all. But they would later even ban all of Europe from its trade too. So Asia is really isolated due to the fact that the banning of Europeans, of course, due to it, and the only restricting them to certain trade, and of course due to the fact that they weren't really expanding at that time. Japan doesn't really become an expansion power until the 1900s, due to the fact that it starts to industrialize, and China really doesn't for a long time either. It's 1960s really. Now the technological advancements is the other two things. These are the other two things I'm going to go with because I'll try to summarize everything at the end, but I feel like I've been talking, there's too much to go over, but I do have these two sections down, but I will have this sheet all completed soon. Everything I kind of go over, and you will be able to print it out and at least read over it before your world history, possibly tomorrow. Technological advancements or innovations. Europe becomes a powerful force due to the willingness to adapt and use key innovations like gunpowder weapons that were originally by China, but they had the willingness and they traded with China even through the Canton system, and they wanted the military, the new weapons and the navigation and the printing press and the shipbuilding techniques. They used that to their advantage. Other countries, other like empires, even the Ottoman Empire and Japan, they didn't really want it. They didn't find any use for it. So Europe was like, okay, we'll find it and we'll use it to our advantage, and that's what Europe does. At this time, Japan and China returned to more traditional lifestyles. They maintained their passing the chance to adapt and use these inventions. So Japan and China, like, they were trying to become more traditional lifestyles. They were trying to go back to older times and not have to use these like technologies, because they were trying to be more. They were trying to make time, especially after China, which had the rule of the Mongols, and they were trying to fix all of that up. And then they had the rule of course, the Ming. They had to fix that up really fast, because the Ming fell pretty fast to the Qing, and then not all this stuff happens and that type of all that time for China. China had to remain. They had to go to a more traditional lifestyle because they had to maintain stability during this time, because they already suffered through so much. So they had no time and no really money or invest or like economics to really become a military power at this time. And Japan was trying to shut itself off from everyone. So the technological advancements allowed European powers to gain large overseas empires, obviously, and carry plants and animals through the Columbian exchange to new colonies, which of course obviously doesn't turn out. China turns out well and kind of doesn't. And they also transport new people to these colonies, which of course affects caste systems, where they carry slaves to new colonies, affects caste systems, and all the new classes in Latin American and of course American societies because of the racial mixings. And it also transforms the interactions of the world, and how Europe was able to basically have the printing presses and everything, and how they were able to interact through messages from print, like actual printed paper. Now, these technologies also gave way to European powers fighting with each other, and if someone did not want to trade with them, they conquered them. Obviously, you see this with India, and you see this with China. You'll see this all throughout. If you don't trade with the come and conquer you. Now, increased contact allowed the printing press to be put to work and spread ideas of culture and religion. The printing press helped out to facilitate the Protestant Reformation by getting these new ideas out. The new ideas, of course, the printing press was very important because it spread new ideas, and it spread new ideas to the new colonies of Spain, Portugal, Portuguese colonies, Spanish colonies, British colonies, French colonies. It spread because now they were able to spread it to indigenous people, and they were able to, if they taught the indigenous people their language, of course. So really, the technological advancements really helped this like era, but it helped like spread ideas, and it helped make Europe the power it was, especially the British. But then you have the gender roles and changes and continuities. So here we got the women during this society. And of course, there's going to be very influential women during this time. For some of them will be queens and businesswomen, like the Elizabeth I, who had that Elizabethan age. And if you remember about the Elizabethan age, that's when Shakespeare was writing his things. And that's also when Britain comes to power. And yeah, just remember that Elizabethan age, that finally the woman age is that when Britain starts coming to power, Shakespeare starts writing shit, and they conquer Spaniards and start their dick moves. So then you have the women can gain power by taking over powerful empires, especially if they were married to powerful men who shared their power with them. Now, there is an exception with this for Victoria the First, I believe. No, Elizabeth. Was it Victoria or Elizabeth? One of those two. Let me see. Elizabeth. Yeah, it was Elizabeth. Elizabeth the First was one who actually wasn't married. She actually took over power anyways. Despite the power of elite women, for the most part, the status and freedom of women had little change from the previous period. They didn't have the right to vote, and they weren't as superior as men. Legally, wives were considered property of their husbands. Stupid as fuck. I'm not a peasant. Women inherited less than sons and brothers, and so if they had a brother and his father died, the brother would get 75% more, just like how women get paid around 73% of a man's dollar. But we're not going to talk about that. And they still had few rights. A huge change in female lives comes with racial mixing of previously unknown cultures. The relationships of mixed couples create new racial categories. This actually can either help or to hurt women, or like women of higher like classes, such as like if it was a completely Spanish woman who was like all from Spain, she was going to have a higher class than a woman who's completely slave woman. But if a slave woman mated with a white male, then like she could have a completely different rank, elevating her status and all that. So the racial mixing had a huge impact on women's lives. Now, changes in trade hurt women. For women, activities such as textile weaving became more of a male thing, with males dominating textile companies, hurting female opportunities at jobs, which weaving was their thing. This has been a thing for women since like the BC times. It was the Greeks they talked about women having the weaving. But of course, when males learn how to weave, they get money. When women learn, it's just supposed to be a thing. But no, I shouldn't get political. Older women were often praised in non-European societies for being wise, but they were feared because they could not be controlled. These thoughts allowed Neo-Confucianism values in Asia to be continued, for they feared the need of control on these females, especially in societies of African, Native American, and even, of course, Asian societies with Chinese. They had this really respect men, like they considered themselves wise and powerful creatures and everything, but they also had like the scarcity that they would make witches and everything. Of course, everyone knows Europeans' thoughts on women who didn't marry or anything, burned. So the new ideas of the Renaissance and the Enlightenment included women and allowed education for women, just not as good as education for men, of course. Oh God. For the highest level of education were only for males, sadly. So basically, the 1450s to the 1750s for women was a very like divided thing. Like if you were a white woman with a lot of money and you were like a powerful woman and like you have a great status. If you were a poor woman, no matter your color or race, class or anything, if you were poor and you didn't have money, then goodbye. Actually, also, I can't say white, actually. Or it's actually Indian women who are from India who had great status could easily become powerful, as said with the rule of Nur Jahan of the Mughal Empire. So you can't just say white, but mainly European, because you don't hear as much as at least said in history books. But really, if you were a woman and you had money or status and you decided to get yourself a sugar daddy who had a lot of money, then you could elevate your status. But if you weren't, well, good luck to you, because you probably won't ever. You will never get as much money, and your men will do the same. Men will be doing something that you've been doing for years, and they'll get money for it, but you won't, and you won't get as good as education or anything. But that's basically 1450s for you with gender roles. Now, to kind of conclude, that was a lot, so I do want to conclude and go over really important things of at least know all of these, and I'll probably have this out for you guys. You just comment you're you able to see. I should be able to see comments. How lovely will this be? But I want to have this all out for you, but I also want to review this really fast because I know it's 8 o'clock and I said it was only going to 8 o'clock, but sadly enough, I had no technological support. But anyways, you have to know about the European rivalry, Spain versus Portugal, France versus Britain, with of course Spain being the dicks before the British. They had it used to be two sections of Spain. They used to be the northern Catholic region and the southern Muslim region. They combined it. But later, this Catholic Spain comes completely Catholic, because Spain. And Spain conquers people, discovers classes, all that fun stuff, and they had a bunch of power. They flipped the coin. They won the New World. Portugal got Africa and a bunch of things, and all they could do was trade because they were worthless. But and basically, Britain and France, they kick out Spain being a power, and they become powers, with Britain actually picking on France for a while until Britain ends up controlling a lot of the world and being assholes to everyone. So that's basically you have to know about Europe. Yay! Russia out of isolation. Know that Russia used to be isolated due to the Mongols. The Mongols put them in isolation in Kievan, Russia, and when Russian rulers really kicked out the Mongols, that's when things started to really get going. You got serfs, the peasants. I mean, sorry, they weren't serfs yet. You have the Cossacks taking over eastern, conquering parts of Asia, and really taking over and basically taking over parts of Asia so that Russia could get more territory. Then you have Peter the Great and Catherine the Great westernizing Russia and making it all westerny cool things. And basically, that's really all you have to know, besides things I've already said about Russia. Islamic gunpowder things, mainly no Ottomans. You don't really have to, you don't need to know the Safavids, besides the fact that they did Shia, and everyone else does Sunni. I'm sorry. Ottomans is this military. They lasted long, and they did 53, and they were the ones who basically established the Janissaries. They had the large empire, and Europeans liked them until Europeans got woke and they learned that Greece is actually part of Europe. And that's basically what you got to know about Ottomans. Besides, Selim was the one who started to make Janissaries, and Suleiman the Magnificent, he was the one who started to really help the Ottoman military, and he was also the one to really make the Ottomans inspired by art. Then you have to know about the Mughals. You really have to know about Aurangzeb and Akbar. Akbar is the one who's religious tolerant, and Aurangzeb is not the one. Aurangzeb basically had two things that hurt India. But one thing he destroyed a lot of religious tolerance between Hindus and Muslims, trying to destroy Hindu populations, Hindu temples, making them taxed more. But then you also have he also had the second thing. He thought Europeans were not the problem. He thought they were all great, which the Portuguese really can't do anything. So he was right with the Portuguese. But then when Britain comes in, he was like, they're just sipping tea. But no, Britain comes and conquers them. So Mughals. Africa, you don't need to know a lot. Just really kind of know King Alfonso. He tried to convert his Congo people into Catholics, and that he did. He was successful. Isolated Asia, know that China cut itself off from Europe because they didn't trust them, because they were actually woke. That was in the Qing dynasty. But they actually started with the Ming dynasty. Mings got taken over by the Qing, who they let in because of all the peasants uprising. They said the Qing can come in and stop the peasants, and the Qing was like, okay, but they also took over the empire. And the Qing basically didn't want the Europeans. They wanted this period of stability, and they wanted to go back to traditional things with Manchu more culture. For the Qing are more Mantua, but they did expand their control over neighboring countries. But along with that, they completely banned parts of Europeans coming in, besides through the Canton system, which isolated a lot of Asia. Japan was very much the same. They banned a lot of Europeans. You can watch History of Japan video. I totally recommend it because it does teach you. Next, technological advancements or innovations. Of course, that's when Europe started getting guns that they willingly to help them navigate themselves to new colonies. Guns were able to take over colonies or take over any territory and start wars with themselves, because that's what Europe does. Then the printing press caused all this religion mess up, especially with Christianity and Christians fighting Christians and all that fun stuff. That's what you really got to know about the technological advancements. Really of the printing press, really know about guns, and really knowing about shipbuilding, because that shipping is what helped get them to America. Now, the changes in continuities, gender roles. If you were rich, then you could be elite, and you got it yourself a sugar daddy, you could be elite. But if you were not, you have a fun time, because period barely changes the gender roles. For what it does, it basically just limits, all it does, nothing really, actually. Women were seen as property still, and basically they didn't get as much education. Women were not really liked unless you were powerful and you got yourself a sugar daddy or something, and got lucky like Elizabeth and got control of an empire. Along with that, just know the Elizabethan age, because that will be also important. That was the age of this golden time for Britain, when they come to power after conquering Spain. They become the dicks after Spain were dicks, and that's really about what you really have to know. That's when also along with British East India Company comes, and all the joint stock companies come, and Shakespeare wrote stuff, and and the English colony settled in Roanoke, and they all disappeared. Lovely. So that's what you have to know, and I think that's probably the most important things to know from 1450s to 1750s. I think this period is one of the most forgotten periods, or like one of the most less cared about. You will probably need to know about this period the most, along with 1750s to 19, and also really focus on 1900s and on. So I might, before the actual AP test, I'm going to probably 1750s to the 1900s, because I have the book in front of me. It's an AP history, world history exam book, and it tells you everything you need to know. So everything that's on here are things that probably might actually be on the exam. So I will go through that. Thank you. I will try to, if you have anything you personally want to go over, I will probably totally go over anything for you guys. And yeah, I'll print you guys one. Don't worry. I'm just here for Japan. Well, if you wanted to, I'm not going to probably go over Japan. If you want to like go over Japan, it's probably one personally. But if you have any questions, if you wanted me to go over any times, I'll do that another time, and I'll try to do a live stream for another time, time zone, anytime things. Just remember, you don't have to know a lot about really the beginning. You don't have to know a lot about Mesopotamia or anything. But I'm also interested in doing a video for what is it? I have the practice test in the book, so I'll go over practice tests with you guys too sometime during a video or a live stream or something before the AP World test. Since this is going to be a really hard test, so I think I really want to go over that type of stuff. But thank you guys for watching, and I feel like it's a YouTube video, but thank you. Wait, how do I